So the last thing I want to throw out there, as it relates to the animation project, is I want to put out this concept of IK, or inverse kinematic. Now, at this point, and maybe it's something that you've heard of if you've been reading about 3D or animation in general. Now, right now, this is considered a forward kinematic solution, and it's not important that we can define this sort of thing. But the concept here is that I'm just going to borrow a leg here. Let me just I'm going to take my right upper leg. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to create a new document, and I'll paste this new document. This is a forward kinematic solution. Now, when it comes to a kinematic solution, basically what it's referencing is the fact that, let's try to move this down again. There we go. Is the fact that we're rotating the solution based on the joint from the top down. So we start with, and I noticed that my leg is bending backwards, so somewhere in my animation, and I thought I caught that before, but I'm over-rotating somewhere, so I'll go back and correct for that. But right now, the solution here, the animation solution, is basically I'm starting with the parent object, and I'm making a rotation happen. I'm moving further and further down the chain to animate my solution visually based on a forward solution, which means that I start with the parent object and I work my way down. Inverse kinematic, the solution would be, well, let me grab the foot and place the foot where it belongs. And I can't really do that with the current setup. If I move the foot, basically, it detaches from the leg. Well, there's a solution. There's some tools inside Cinema 4D, and pretty much any 3D program has this forward kinematic solution. Now, I'm going to reverse engineer my animation here just a bit. Basically, I don't want any animation on the object, and I want to rotate this back to a neutral position. The way that I'm going to reverse engineer this animation is the first thing I'm going to go to the window, timeline. I'm going to select summary or select the object. It's the only thing animated. I'm going to delete all of the animation in the sequence by selecting it and pressing the delete key. So now when I hit the play button, nothing happens. Okay. I also want to get rid of all the extra frames that I had. I'm gonna take that back down to 30 frames. Not that that's crucial, but I have fewer variables that I'm taking into consideration. At this point, if I select the right upper and I look at the rotation, I can see that I have a -35. So I'm going to zero out that value. I have lower and foot. Now, my scenario is set up just the way that I want it for an inverse kinematic solution. Now, the key here, the way that IK works, is that you got to have the hierarchy in place just the way that it is. Okay, so I have to have the same way that we had a forward kinematic solution in terms of the hierarchy. We need that relationship for an inverse kinematic solution. Now, the upper leg is the parent object, followed by the lower leg, followed by the foot. The way that IK works is that it basically looks at the rotation point or the pivot point for each of these objects. The right upper leg, and the next case it'll be the foot. It looks at all the pivot points in between and builds a chain based on those and simulates the way that any kind of connection is made and assumes that this is kind of a rigid body. So, in other words, it takes the pivot point of the upper leg, the knee, and the foot into account. And the way that we set up an IK chain is pretty simple and pretty straightforward. It's important that you have this scenario right. You have to have the upper leg selected and the foot object selected. And the only way that you can select both of those objects at the same time is if you select the top or bottom object, hold down the command key, and click on the alternative object. Now, this is not equivalent to shift clicking, and I want to point out that I do not have the lower leg selected. Okay, so I can't select all this stuff. I got to have the top of what I want the IK chain to be. I'm going to command click and select the bottom of the IK chain. Okay, and so in the concept here, this can be a little abstract at first. It's using the top pivot point and the bottommost pivot point. So basically, we're ignoring the knee for a minute here when we select this. Okay, so I want to select the uppermost followed by the bottommost object in this scenario to get this leg to work. And what I want to do is I want to go to this character menu. And for those of you using anything prior to Cinema 4D 12, you'll see a command in here called create IK chain. I don't have it. I'm using 12. So I need to go into the commands menu and choose create IK chain. So again, if you're using a version previous to 12, this icon will be located in the root of the list. They've reorganized it under commands, and I'm going to create IK chain. Now when I do that, I get a couple things pop up in the object manager. Next to the right upper leg, I get this this IK tag, and I can ignore that, but that's a new option that popped up. And I get this thing called foot goal. Now, when you build IK, it's based on what's called goals. And the function of a goal is that this is now the thing that controls our object. And if our IK is set up properly, I can grab the move tool and I can select the goal and I can move the goal. And when I move the goal around, you can see that that foot starts to swing. Now, the function of IK is that it takes the basic structure of the object and tries to point it at the goal. Okay, now if I just slide it back and forth on the z-axis, not too exciting, but watch what happens when I lift it up. Okay, it actually bends at the knee. So based on the pivot point, remember there's a pivot point here, there's a pivot point here, and a pivot point here. And you can see there's an IK chain that's been built between the uppermost pivot point and the lowermost pivot point. And so this creates a completely different dynamic in that I can just move that goal and it forces the knee to bend. Okay, so that's the basic principle of IK. The upside to this is that you can build an IK chain on an arm, and rather than rotating the upper shoulder and the elbow and the hand into position, basically you can grab what would basically amount to the hand goal, or in this case the foot goal, and just move that goal where you want it, and it points the arm and the hand in that direction. So in other words, the kinematic solution, the animation solution, is being solved in inverse fashion from what we've done before, hence the term inverse kinematic. So we're basically taking the goal object, the foot, and putting it in the position that we want that foot to be in, and everything else resolves up the chain. Now, I'm just going to get rid of the foot goal. I'm going to delete it, and I'm going to select the IK tag and delete it. I'm left with a leg that's in a strange rotation position, so I got to select each one of the objects, zero out the rotation. I'm going to make sure that they're all zeroed out and everything's good. Now, some of you might encounter an issue. I lucked out and my leg bent backwards. It bent the way that it was supposed to. Some of you might encounter an issue when you create an IK chain, that when you lift up the goal, your knee bends backwards. And one of the things that you can do to account for that and correct is, before you create an IK chain, I'm going to select the lower leg and I'm just going to rotate it forward just 5 degrees, just a little bit. So suggest the direction that that bend should occur, and that'll help resolve that issue if you happen to bump into it. So let me review how you set up an IK chain again. I'm going to select the upper leg. I'm going to command click the bottom of that chain. So the right upper leg, I'm going to command click the foot. So again, lower leg is not selected in this scenario. I'm going to go to the character pull down menu, and I'm looking for create IK chain. Once I do that, I've established a goal object. And it just so happens that the goal object adopts the name of the bottommost object in the chain. And so now if I just pick that goal up and move it around, you can see that that leg does everything it can to resolve towards that goal. Okay, so if I jump back into my walk cycle and I select my whole entire walker, and I'll just copy, create a new document, and paste, I'm going to jump into window timeline, and I'll just select the summary and delete all the animation associated with it. I'll take my frame rate, my frames way down. Now I could go through and rotate my character back into its neutral position, which is probably the best thing to do, but for the sake of the demo, rather than going through and zeroing out all the things that I know that I rotated at some point, I'll just do it just for one leg, and I'll do it for one arm, I'll just zero out that rotation. Now, had I saved this in this rig in my neutral standing position, I wouldn't have to go back and do this. But if I take my upper arm and I look at the hierarchy here, I'm going to select the upper arm. I'm going to Command Shift on my hand object, and I should be able to go into Character, Commands, Create IK Chain. Now I have a hand goal. And with that selected, I can test it out, and look at that. So I'm getting an error in my IK. Okay, it's bending the wrong way. So I can cheat that by, I'll just undo until I get rid of that IK chain. If I go to the lower arm and I go to rotate, I'll just shift and rotate it forward just a little bit, and that should give me my IK a clue as to which way I want this to rotate. So I selected the upper arm, command click the hand object, and I'll go to Character. I'll go to Commands, IK Chain, and so hopefully now, yeah, there we go. So now when I lift it up, you can see that it's really forcing that, encouraging it to take the shortest distance. Okay, so now I've corrected for that elbow bending, so it's not bending out towards into the torso. Okay, so now I can move that goal around, and look, that's the effect that I get. Okay, now if I'm going to animate, if I'm going to attempt to animate with this, it's the goals that we're going to be animating with, not the actual arm and the leg. Okay, so I'll go to my right upper leg. I'm going to command click on my foot, and I'll try right out of the box with my IK chain, and when I lift it up, that resolved properly, so I don't need to do that rotation technique. So I have a foot goal and a hand goal. These are the two things that I'm going to animate. Now, another thing, the goal objects exist outside my object group. Okay, so the goal of my hands and my legs at this point are always to try to resolve towards the foot goal. So if I take my little character here and I move him around, you can see that it's always trying to move towards those goals. Okay, and so what I could do is I could take the foot and the hand goal and make them a child of the walker. So now when I select the walker and I move the whole thing around, the goals are moving with the walker. So if I want to move this object across stage and I'm animating the foot and the hand based on the IK, it all moves together. Okay, so you can actually get a lot of mileage out of this. Okay, I'll just take the upper body here and kind of, I could build a whole IK chain for this entire my entire walker here, and I could articulate it in a very different way than I would just by rotating. Okay, so just something I want to throw out there. IK can be a lot of fun. It can require a lot of time to get the IK chains to work so that everything works the way that you feel like it should. I could build an IK chain for the head and the neck, and now instead of rotating the neck, I can just move the head in a position and the body will start to fall into place. So just something to think about if you want to experiment with IK. Do that as a separate project or a separate rig for your walking cycle, and we'd like to see that in Vimeo and post it to the discussion board. It's just another set of tools for you to take into consideration. And if you have any questions, post inside the discussion board. So our goal for this animation project is to have 2 walk cycles, 2 fully rendered walk cycles. Remember to go back and reference the Preston Blair walk cycle. So do a simple walk cycle and do an alternative walk cycle at the very least. So you're going to turn in 2 videos for this, both in the discussion forum and both at the end of the lesson. Turn in those links. And if you're feeling ambitious, try one in IK, and also think about rendering these movies out and then splicing them together using something like iMovie, Premiere, or Final Cut. I will take some time in the next week or two to put together a really brief demonstration using Premiere and using Final Cut. So if you have access to that software, if you're working on the Tri-C network, you'll have access to those tools, on how you might use those tools to string these clips together and have some really simple transitions, titles, and import sounds so that you can build a really effective demo reel of your walk cycle. So take some time, work through this project. I am extending the project according to the syllabus to give you a little bit more time to work on that, and I'll post details in Blackboard. So have fun with the project, post your works in progress in the discussion board, and if you have any questions, post those in the discussion board as well, and I'll get back to you. And we'll catch up. I'll start preparing the concepts for the next micro project, and as is always the case, contact me if you have any questions.